Hello and welcome back everyone to another episode of Amphibious Analysis. Slothcakes here, and today we're going to be going back and looking at the zgok again, but we're going to be analyzing his most well-known variant, the MSM-07E zgok E. And since this is a variant, I highly recommend going watching the zgok episode so you can follow along easier and so I don't repeat everything I said here. First we have the name and model number. We do have a change with 2 additional E's after the 07 and the zgok. And in both cases, it stands for experimental, experimental type, or experiment. So as a full name, we have the Mobile Suit Marine type, model number 07, experimental type, zgok experimental type. A mouthful and a little redundant, but at least it's straightforward. And in some cases, the E is placed before the MS, like the EMS-10 Zuda or the EMS-05 ARG, or after the model number like the MS-18E Camphor. And the placement of the E can be led to a lot of reasons. It could be that it's a variant, it could be that the mobile suit itself is a new line, it could be manufacturer reasons, where it was made, who made it, the time it was made, what it was made for, or it could just be Zeon being Zeon. Anyways, let's head on to appearance. So the zgok E, by a glance, is still a zgok. Still recognizable, still looks the same, still the giant mechanical crab demon. Side by side, the E just looks thicker. Forearms, legs, chest, crotch area, he just looks like he has more armor to him and he has more detail going on. Some key things you'll notice is that his claws, he has 4 of them instead of 3. On his back, we don't see the normal backpack, we see either no backpack, depending on the source you're looking at, or a large orange weird looking backpack. And he does have shoulder armor now, which side by side just makes him look taller and make him have a stronger appearance. Looks like he's standing up with his back straight. And my favorite change is his limbs, where they used to just look like donuts and paper towel tubes stacked on top of each other. They now look plated and overlap each other and look like they give good coverage. And we'll go into detail on why things look like this in a little bit, but before we do, we gotta talk about his history. And we can't talk about the zgok E's history without mentioning the United Maintenance Program, one of Zeon's smartest decisions during the 1-year war. So let me paint it like this. Zeon finally caught up to the bullshit and they realized, yeah, having so many mobile suits from different shapes and sizes, using weapons that are complex for no reason and exclusive to few, trying again and again to reinvent the wheel, is a problem. This shit's gonna take time, money, and resources. So some amazing people at Zeon thought, what if we streamline our stuff and make mobile suits have comparable parts like cockpits, reactors, internal components, weapon systems, things like that. The more mobile suits share with each other, the easier it would be to repair and maintain them. And this goes with weapons and parts as well. You want to be able to pump them out continuously, and if you streamline them, that means they're always going to have a mobile suit to go with, and then they're just sitting there waiting for 1 or 2 mobile suits that can only use them to use them. And I mean, just look at the Federation. So many things are based off the gym that if your experimental one-of-a-kind mobile suit got badly damaged, you could probably use one of the many gyms lying around to repair it. Versus Zeon, just since so many mobile suits have just completely different chassis, looks, and everything, you're gonna be shit out of luck if your mobile suit gets a boo-boo and now can't be deployed. And we can keep on talking and going into it, both a meta and in-universe reason, the lore, how it affects other mobile suits, but this is a zgok E episode, so let's stay on track. But hopefully I got the point across of what the United Maintenance Program is about. So anyways, zgok go in, zgok E come out, and it was successful. The zgok E outperformed the zgok in stats, weapons, performance, all that snaps, and now it's much more compatible with other UMP mobile suits. So let's go into details and talk numbers. Starting with height, they both stand at 18.4 meters. Now, I always thought the zgok E was taller, and I always forget that they're both the same height. I think it's because the shoulders and how the zgok E is always depicted, he just looks taller. Moving to his weight, at max, the E is at 88.9, and at empty, he's at 69.5. compared to the zgok's 96.4 at max and 65.1 on empty. So max weight, the zgok E is lighter, but on empty he's just a little bit heavier. And a reason between the weight difference can be his armor. The zgok's made out of a super high tensile steel, which was common for Zeon. However, the zgok E is made out of titanium alloy ceramac composite, and this armor material change could be one of the reasons at empty the zgok E is heavier, just because he is more armored with this new material. And finally, to his generator, the E pushes a kilowatt of 2570 compared to the zgok's 2480. This is only a 90 kilowatt difference. So while these numbers are nice, they're not too far off from each other. But do remember, on paper the zgok E would be easier to maintain since the uniform parts, and it would put less strain on the manufacturers. Also remember that I said on paper this will be easier to maintain, so keep that in your noggin as we go over weapons. So his weapons are going to feel familiar. They're quite similar to the zgok with just some changes here and there. First up is his vice claws, his upgraded iron nails. The vice claws, like the iron nails, are attached to his forearm. Great for stabbing and slashing, they don't heat up and are easier to maintain and repair. A standard in nearly every Amphibious mobile suits. Same song and dance, we've heard this before. But this does have a few extra features, like the extra nail going from 3 to 4. And the placement is always depicted in a hand way with 3 on top and 1 on the bottom. And this leads to the most noted and odd feature about the vice claws, and that they're more suitable to be used as manipulators compared to the iron nails, being able to either hold, grab, carry things for insert reason here. Now I assume since they are just giant ass claws, they can use it for simple things, like cargo to move around, maybe an important object for a mission, dragging your boy who just got his legs blown off, things like that that don't take delicacy. And to note, it does depend on the depiction. Some give him a flat plier-like nails, while other gives him much more pointy claws, so that could affect how he grabs things or how easy it is. And due to a mixture of him just not appearing in things and having little info, we don't have much to go off. However, we can compare things to other mobile suits. The MS-13 Gashia has iron nails, and somehow he has been depicted to use and hold weapons. It is said that he can use throwables, but he has been shown to be able to use the hammer gun, which is a custom weapon which I believe was specifically made so the Gashia could hold on to it. What I assume is that it pegs into the center of the arm, allowing him to actually shoot it. And while a part of me does believe someone put this info out there just to mess with me, because every time I look at it, it's goofy to say the best. The zgok E should follow the same pattern, however him being amphibious means there's a few problems of him submerging himself in water, making some of the weapons iffy, but in a vacuum ground setting, the zgok E would benefit from using throwables. And for melee, the only benefit will be giving access to heat weapons, but both the Gashia and the E have never been depicted holding one because they both have built-in melee weapons. And same for range weapons, the E, unlike the Gashia, has built-in range weapons in his forearm, so there wouldn't really be a point in him holding one. And if we go with the theory that I said with the Gashia pegging his weapon into his forearm, the zgok E has a weapon there, so he probably doesn't even have that option. But let's stay on his forearms and talk about his next weapon, and that is his dual beam cannons. These are again similar to his regular NPCs, but with some extra juice. They're stronger than his prior, and this is due to them being powered not only by his high generator, but with the E-caps installed. The E-caps can be described kinda as Minovsky batteries that power and allow beam weapons to be used on mobile suits. And as a side note, Zeon did have trouble with beam weapons. Both had them on their warships, but Zeon couldn't nail it to make it work on a mobile suit. Compared to the Federation, while rare, they nailed it with the Gym. And besides mobile armors and amphibious mobile suits, it took them some time to mass produce it. And as for the beam cannons as a whole, they're just the zgok NPCs but better. They're the least visually changed out of all of his weapons. Similar to the prior, however they're stronger, have a higher rate of fire, and can be shot more. Now we don't know the rate of fire or the full ammo capacity, but considering that his next weapon, which we'll talk in a second, gets a major change to it, and makes his beam cannons really his only land ranged weapon, so it has to have a high enough rate of fire and enough ammo capacity to do the job. But they're just NPCs but better, so there's not too much to talk about here. He could probably still blast his own Vice Claws if he's fired it while they were closed. He can fire both of them at the same time. Like I said, zgok but better. But now we're finally moving on to his head, and we're looking at his 6-tubed rockets. However, this has the biggest change, because they're not the zgok's rockets, they're now the 6-tube torpedo launchers. Torpedoes, for the ill-informed, are self-propelled missiles meant to work underwater, being designed to travel and work dealing with the underwater pressures and all the shenanigans that underwater causes. And besides the major change of torpedoes, there's a lot they have in common and still share. Location, they still shoot up, they have 6 tubes, and they still probably hold 30 rounds. And with all that through, let's now ask the biggest question about this, and that is why? Why change land and air rockets to water-based rockets? Having rockets that can be used on land and shittily in water seems better than exclusively water ones, right? Now the first and more open question is how the UC torpedoes work. Do they have self-propellant into them that they can actually be used on land? Could they launch themselves at a close range maybe if we're being generous, or are they just exclusively in water? So for this, let's roll with the idea that they're exclusively water-based, and let's bring up his beam cannons again, because they're more reliable now with a higher rate of fire and more shots. So now the zgok E can rely on these as a main weapon. And while land rockets are nice, having these dedicated to water means he now has a stronger underwater presence. Because beam weapons dissipate faster when in water, he can still use his melee, but he needs to get up close and he still most likely has the same problem as the zgok of getting stuck. So having a tool that's dedicated for water combat is very helpful. So his weapons are still the same concept-wise, just moved and changed a bit. We got better iron nails, stronger beam weapons, and water-dedicated missiles. He's still deadly up close with his improved iron nails, and because they now act as manipulators, he can now tackle more missions. At a range, you now have to deal with even stronger beam weapons. And if you're underwater, he's most likely faster than you, and now he can huck torpedoes at you. And let's not forget, he's still a zgok, meaning he's pretty damn fast. But we're not done here, because we still have one piece of equipment to talk about. And that's the jetpack. Now this functionally is the same as the zgok's chemical rockets. They both give the zgok an extra push when needed, except the E's is now orange, and kinda sticks out. It's a little ugly to be honest, but the most important thing is it's now purgeable. So if you have a specific reason, or you just run out of fuel, you don't want to carry this empty rocket around, so you can just purge the thing. And under the rockets it is shown that he has thrusters, so it's not like you're out of options when purged. So, like the torpedoes, let's answer why the change. So it was obviously redesigned to be purgeable, but also hopefully Xeon simplified the design to make it cheaper and easier to produce. Because, well, if you purge this thing, it's not like gonna come back with it. You could probably scavenge it later, but most of the time, when it's gone, it's gone. And the reason behind all this could lead us to the zgok E being a hit-and-run mobile suit. He can do everything the zgok can do, but faster and more reliable now. This was highlighted in the opening for War in the Pocket, where the High Guard, which also has this backpack, and zgok E had a target mission that they went in fast and hit hard. There isn't another amphibious mobile suit that could have done that mission as fast as them. And also, well, there's no actually also, I wish I had more examples of the zgok E doing shit, but this leads to the major problem with this guy, and that is that there's very few of them. We don't have an exact number, but honestly, my guess is maybe there's 5 zgok E's in existence, and if I want to push it, maybe 10. And this is due to the United Maintenance Program being so late into the 1-year war that it never got a chance to get going. And in addition, this is an amphibious mobile suit. Unlike other UMP mobile suits that could be used on land or primarily in space, there was very few reasons for them to make an amphibious mobile suit late into the 1-year war since Xeon got pushed back into space. So we don't really have much combat data and actual performance to go by. And to add to this, the zgok E has a big inherent problem that's shared with other UMP mobile suits, and that's the unified parts, which means similar cockpits. Now, we don't know the details to this. I'm assuming because it's Amphibious mobile suit, the cockpit is overall different from the other UMP mobile suits, but we can assume that the zgok E cockpit is different from the regular zgok. So your veteran zgok pilot might not switch over to the E because he's much more comfortable with the zgok. And if you think that's absurd, well, it is his life. I'd rather go out with something I'm comfortable with because one little whoopsie daisy and I'm But this is also not uncommon. We've have Zaku 1 pilots who used the Zaku 1 all the way till the fight of a Baoku, which they could have used Zaku 2s or the highly superior Gelgoog, but they stuck with the Zaku 1 because it's what they're comfortable with. And also, remember when I said he's easy to repair and maintain on paper? Well, on paper he would be easier, but there's not as much UMP mobile suits out there, especially zgok E's. And he's still a zgok. If we look at the Zaku 2 FZ, which is a UMP mobile suit, that would be a lot easier to repair in every sense compared to this guy because, well, one's a Zaku, very simple, and the other one's a zgok, much more complicated. But with all that, there isn't too much to go into. I wish he appeared in more shit besides video games, but the only thing I can talk about is he does make an appearance in the background of the Unicorn manga, and there's a Gelgoog that's arm was replaced with the E's, but the E's he's just a little underwhelming at best. He's an upgrade zgok with some fancy shit on him, but that's just it. He's just a better zgok. There isn't much to branch off, he doesn't have a goofy unique mechanic, unlike other mobile suits we covered. He's just a better zgok. Everything I said in the zgok video, it's that plus more. And don't take this as me bashing him, all the zgok variants appear in very little things, and it's just funny that the zgok E is the most well-known zgok variant, but he's the most simple to understand, which could be a good and bad thing depending what you're looking at. But now with all that through, I can talk about something that I thought would be really fun and extremely stupid, and it's an open-ended question that I hope you the viewers answer in the comments. And that's the zgok variants. I briefly touched on them in the zgok episode, but the question I wanted to ask was, with the zgok E, how would that affect the zgok variants? How would the zgok variants be if they went under the United Maintenance Program? And there are some boring ones that we could realistically answer. The Ram zgok would just be the same thing, but now it's the E. And same thing with the zgok, it would just be the same thing, but instead of with the zgok E on top. But the two more interesting ones would be the zgok, a zgok variant made for land combat. It has some strange weapons to it and lacks beam weapons, and would any of this change with UMP? And also the Gashir, being under the UMP, maybe he could hold better and more practical weapons other than that weird hammer gun. Would he perform much better? Would he see deployment? Or would he still be a weird gimmick mobile suit? And we don't need to end it here. Maybe the High Gog could get some of these variants. Maybe some of these variants would work a lot better with the High Gog instead of the zgok. I think there's enough information on this subject to maybe garner its own video, but I still want to leave it here because maybe you could get some of you guys' noggins jogging, and I think it would be fun, so just go wild. And for the Gunpla builders out there is a high grade of this guy. But now let's wrap everything up, and what can I say? Well, like I said plenty of times, he's a better zgok. And like nearly everything that came out of the United Maintenance Program, it's a pretty damn good mobile suit and it shows. And while we mentioned UMP multiple times, I do think it deserves its own video because it has some interesting things to it. And I do wonder if you could throw other shit into it and see what would come out. 8 guy. But the zgok E was a success that never got its chance to succeed. He never got his chance to shine and probably never will. And that's just the depressing reality. There are many instances where I see a zgok either be the 1 year war or after, where I just think, damn, if that was a zgok E, the outcome would be radically different. But sadly, we can only speculate. But let's end this off with something positive, and with all the changes the zgok E has, he's still just as damn cute as the zgok. So, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you next time.